Hi everyone, it's Adam with Milo's Restoration, and today I've got a furniture flipping video for you, and I'm going to be walking you through my process and giving you some tips to get a smooth painted surface on your next furniture flip. Starting with the cleaning process here, this is Sherwin-Williams product. It's called M1 Cleaner and Deglosser. It's a little bit harsh though, so just be aware that on certain finishes you might have a tendency to kind of burn through them and pick up a little bit of stain or something like that on your rag. I wouldn't be too alarmed about it. I don't really necessarily think that it's a problem, but just something to be aware of if you're going to be using this on an older piece. I, generally speaking, just like to wipe it off with a rag, and if it's a bad enough surface, I'll use a Scotch-Brite to kind of abrade the surface. But for this piece, it wasn't too bad, so I just used a microfiber and then rinsed everything with a bucket of clean water. So now I'm just using some general purpose isopropyl alcohol to clean the inside of the drawers with, and also the inside of the case. So this is my taping method for frameless cabinets as well as frameless furniture. There's no face frame to conveniently stick your tape to, so what I do is I make a square with tape where I want it to be, or I want the paint to stop at, and then I go around and tape my paper to that, and it works out well. You just got to make sure you get all the holes kind of plugged up with tape. So sanding is something that is kind of dependent on the piece as you get it. And for this particular case, it really didn't need a whole lot of sanding back. I wasn't really sanding for flatness, I was more just sanding to get a bite on the primer. And I used a Surf Prep fine pad. It was a sponge pad too, so it was kind of, a squishy-ish pad. And then after that, I tack clothed everything after wiping it with like a wet or damp rag. But I always use that damp rag first. So this is a vinyl modified primer by Centurion. I'm going to be using their top coat, Centurions I mean. So generally speaking, I like to use their primer as well. And I just add a little bit of lacquer thinner to it, probably about 10 to 15%. I just feel like it helps it level out better. These guns, this primer does not spray well out of a turbine unit, so just be aware of that. I find that it sprays better with a cup gun on an air compressor for whatever reason. And yeah, I'm not too concerned with how I spray this because this stuff is not really like gel and kind of level out. It dries pretty much almost instantly. So if I have like a pattern or anything like that there, I'm not too worried about it. It's all going to get sanded back anyway. So now I'm going to fill in some of those smaller holes that I might have not bondoed in the beginning. Generally speaking, for the very kind of small little surface imperfections that are not very deep, I use this Bondo glazing putty. It works good. I just take my sander and sand it back, and then you need to prime it again, obviously. Not just because it's red, but also because this will actually kind of, I think, eat your top coat away, if that makes any sense. So you can get a chemical reaction between the top coat and the glazing. So you definitely need to prime back over this after you've sanded it back. So I don't know what happened to that drawer, but I did have to do a little bit more work on that one off camera. It actually took about 3 or 4 coats of primer and sanding. It just, for some reason, one of the guns must have dripped on it, and things like that happen all the time though. So just something to take into account to your time frame whenever you're planning for a furniture flip or a restoration project. When I sand the final coat of primer, I'm using a Surf Prep Superfine, and I'm moving very quickly around the edges because I don't want to burn through and have spots of bare wood. You'll get really weird absorption and stuff like that, and you'll also get it where it'll pull away from the edges, and you'll kind of be left with like an ugly wall of paint. So you really just want to make sure that you don't burn through your primer, and that'll keep your sheen looking consistent as well. So when it comes to like the middle though, I will kind of grind down on it a little bit more with a sander, but I am really careful around the edges. Even the rounded ones, like on the side of this case here, I move pretty quickly. The top coat is a 1K product. It's technically a water-based polyurethane. It's by Centurion, and I mix about 10% distilled water in it. And I use a 1.8 tip on my Fuji, and I set the air pressure all the way up. I try to maintain about 6 to 8 inches away from the surface whenever I'm spraying, and that seems to kind of have helped the issue that I was having previously with air bubbles. I've been having that issue all winter long, and I don't know if it's because it was really warm today or what the reason was, but the air bubbles were way less noticeable today than they have been, so that was really good. But yeah, I have like a little coatings card in my pocket by TCP Global. I'll take that out. I'll put the gauge in and see how thick I'm spraying it on. You need to get one of those if you're going to be spraying water-based polyurethanes or water-based lacquers. And I try to go for about 3 to 4 wet mils. I also tack everything off. And when I tack things, generally speaking, I've already used a damp rag on them before to get the majority of the dust off. And I just very lightly kind of graze the surface with a tack cloth to make sure there's no residual dust. all of my sanding is done with a superfine, and I move pretty quickly on the edges because you still will burn through to the wood if you're not careful. But on the surfaces, I definitely try to sand out all that orange peel and really get like a good flat, smooth surface. You have a little bit more kind of bodied material to work with now, so it's a good time to do that. So I think I did 3 coats in total on pretty much everything. Generally speaking, 3 coats is going to be the most I'm going to do, and I try to do 2 if I can. I always aim for 2 because 2 is sufficient. But if I can't and I need a third one, like what I just did there, I broke that drawer front and had to redo that. I glued it up and then bonded it and sanded it, primed it and put it back into rotation. But yeah, that was unfortunate. But stuff like that happens on a daily basis here, so just something to be aware of. So this is a hodgepodge of footage from my second and third coats, but yeah, I had to get that drawer front fixed. But that wasn't the only reason that I had to do a third coat. I actually caught a few runs too, so I had to take care of those and then respray those areas where that was, and that was pretty much the whole case. Not that I had a ton of runs, but the thing is that to blend in a panel, you really need to spray a whole section from one stopping point to another stopping point. You can't really just spray a touch up in the middle of like a piece of, a panel or something like that. It has to be a whole section that you repaint. Otherwise, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb, especially on a higher sheen. self-explanatory here. I'm just putting those cup hinges back on, and I'm going to put them back on the case. Everything's still kind of delicate now though, so just be careful. Even for a 1K or 2K product, you still need to be delicate whenever you're putting hardware back on after you've recently painted. So these hardware just came from Lowe's. They're like $3. They're brass. They're not the most expensive hardware, but whenever I have a lot of little hardware like this, I need to kind of save a little bit of money. So this is usually what I go with. So here's the finished dresser. If you want to see more restoration and furniture flipping content, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.